Well, hello everybody. So my name's Luke, I'm the Sport Executive Officer for this year, and hopefully in the next 5 minutes I'll give you a bit of an insight into what my plans are coming up. So I'm going to go into all these in a bit more detail, but my 3 main points for this year, these have changed ever so slightly since I made this. So in the last week they've altered quite significantly, but I'll explain as we go along. So the AU strategic vision. So for me, the really key thing is I want to take a kind of a greater insight, a stronger look into the AU than we've ever done before. So it's been quite a while since we've had a bit of a forensic examination of where we are and what we're doing. Now the bit that I said's changed is, you know what, in the last 2 weeks I've realised I shouldn't be looking at the AU solely on its own, but actually I should be looking at sport at the union. Because I think actually as a visionary process there could be a massive change in how sport's structured at the university and LSU. So rather than it just being the AU, I've kind of widened that scope. And the next thing for me is finding the path to what I would like to call a futuristic world. So what our vision is going to be in 3, 5, 10 years time, actually where should we be heading and what should we be doing. So that's my first point. The second is that actually I really want to make sure that our clubs are sustainable and the AU's financial strength's restored. So when I took over the year before I started, the AU was £33,000 overspent. Last year we were £20,000 underspent. I've taken every single AU club out of debt. Bar 2 that were kind of financial punishments for poor money management last year. But we've basically gone a massive way to making sure the AU is sustainable. The difficulty that we have, our bucks costs go up by 10% every year, which is massive figures in terms of financial resource. So how we tackle that ongoing is a really difficult challenge. But for me, making sure that we're sustainable is really important. And the second one is making sure that we're rich. Now, by rich, I don't mean have loads of money. What I mean is able to invest in the things that are important to us. So when we have clubs that are in need of development, when we have campaigns that we want to support, when we have projects that we need to take as an athletic union, we need to have the capacity to do them. And ultimately, being rich means being powerful, and that's what we want to try and do at Loughborough, and there's no one that embodies that more than this guy, so we're going to try it. That was a great joke 3 weeks ago. It's gone downhill. But anyway, so empower those at our core. What that basically means for me is student voice. So actually our students ultimately are what sport and the athletic union is all about. Making sure that they have a voice, making sure that we represent their student needs. So absolutely fundamental for what the athletic union's built upon. Do we do that in the right way? Actually, I'm not so sure. We're trying to get there. So we're trying to give our AU exec more authority so that it doesn't just sit with myself. We've introduced the Student Sports Senate last year, which is kind of the overseeing body for all of student sport. So that ranges right from my lifestyle at one end of participation all the way up to performance sport, which is the real elite athletes. So we've introduced that body, which contains all those chairs, but there's more we can do with that. So empowering students is absolutely fundamental. So the strategic vision. So for me, actually looking into the future, so 3, 5, 10 years time, I think it's a really difficult challenge to look 10 years into the future. But I think that's actually something we need to do. Where should sport sit at Loughborough, and particularly what's the future for the athletic union? Lots of universities have got a very different model to how sport works. Loughborough kind of sits on its own, but perhaps it's time for us to have a reassessment of where we should be, and that's the piece for me. And then the 3, 5 year, the shorter term goals is kind of setting in place a sort of a guideline for actually what we should be doing to get there, so that sport executive officers that follow on for me actually have a kind of a framework by which they know where they're trying to go, and I think that's really important, especially being a second year SAB myself, having experience of seeing it for a year is going to be quite a rare trait that not many people are going to have in the future, so I feel like I'm in a good place to do that. So clubs financial sustainability, as I mentioned, we're getting there with AU financial sustainability in our clubs. So we have a new policy which means every club needs a 10% buffer on their total grant pot. We've introduced that this year. It's gone fairly well. Most of our clubs have reached it already, but there are still a number that we're working on. So we're getting to that point very swiftly. Long-term sustainable plans. This is the real crux of the issue that the AU faces. As I say, our costs go up extortionately every single year, and how do we face that when actually our income doesn't go up by the same amount every year? We rely quite heavily at the moment on going to the university and asking for increased funds each time, but actually what's our long-term sustainable plan? Some of that is actually being able to support our clubs in the way that we need to. So we've introduced a new grant funding system that again is all focused on club development, so how do we drive our clubs forward so that year on year they get better. That's a new system. Previous to this year, AU grant funding's been based quite historically, so it's about reducing membership costs for quite an arbitrary set of clubs. There wasn't really any reason why certain clubs got grant funding, certain haven't. Now we've got a kind of a much more formalised grant funding system that any club can apply for. They have to do it in a kind of a more professional manner, so it works on student development for later life as well. But a really good way of making sure that our clubs it's all transparent, people can see where their money's going, and we're supporting things that we think are in need of financial help. And then the other thing is actually we've really tried to do some stuff around fundraising. So this is about being able to support our membership in a better way. So whether that be through sponsorships or the alumni fund that we set up last year, we're trying to build a model by which we can actually support our clubs. So there was a kind of project that I put in place last year, which called the Alumni and Supporters Club Fund. It's basically we try and get alumni to give back £1 a month, and over time that builds up. Now, if we could get all of our 56 clubs to sign up 20 members a year, and they signed up 20 members next year, and so on after, in 30 years' time, the AU would generate just under £500,000 every single year. So 20 members per club, you imagine how many people leave at the end of a year. It's not that many. Actually, all you need is 20 of them to sign up, commit to £1 a month, and we could be in a much, much more sustainable place down the line. So that was one of the places of that. So empowering those at our core. So ReEngage the Athletic Union Executive. So by ReEngage, I don't mean that they're not engaged. I don't mean that we don't all have a fantastic time and do some amazing things, but I actually mean re-engage them in the key decisions. So actually making sure that every key decision that's based on the Athletic Union is passed through the Athletic Union Executive, which I don't think's happened over the last few years. It has come predominantly through my role, and actually that's not what we're about. We are all about the students that lead us. So that's a really key one for me. We've also absolutely maximised probably our volunteer basis at the moment. So we've taken our AU exec was 8 members strong last year. We introduced a subcommittee structure, so it's now 38 members strong this year. So we've gone up by, well, almost 500% basically in terms of our volunteer base that sits directly under me. So we've got a much more solid structure, and it's working really well for us at the moment. But embedding that so that whoever takes on after me's got an easy job. And then Loughborough sport coordinators in every hall. We've also introduced a new individual that goes around communicating all the messages, be it from participation, about coaching, refereeing, all the way up to some of the big events on the main sporting side you can organise. So just making sure they all feel part of that structure as well. Student Sports Centre, as I mentioned, we created it last year. It was kind of quite fresh in my head when I brought it in. I wasn't 100% sure what it was supposed to do, but I knew it was the right thing. After a year of doing it, we're kind of working out where we sit, and I think it's starting to go really well. So creating a structure, a purpose, and a profile as the leading voice of sport, particularly a profile within the university structures, is key. And then finally, there's a student insight project going on in the union. Even before that was sort of muted, I think we were talking about doing a massive one around sport and actually making sure that we're representing students in the way they want to be represented. So it's one of the challenges of being an executive officer is people say, right, what do students want? And I go, well, honestly, it's quite hard to know. I don't know what the average student thinks about what's wrong with sport. I can say what my experiences are wrong with sport, but I don't know what the average student wants and what the collective actually think are the most important things we address. So being able to find that out through a real valid research project. I'm not talking about someone chucking something together on SurveyMonkey. I mean going out for external research partners and being able to do this properly and really finding out what matters to our students is the type of project we want to lead on. So the extras, so I'm just going to run through these. The Conference Cup, I remember, some of you might remember Big Bucks Wednesday, we held it a few years ago. We've also got the Conference Cup finals back in Loughborough this year. It's basically the next tier down, so second and third team, so I pitched for that at the end of last year. We won it, so it's going to be a massive event that's going to be probably the biggest student-led multi-sport event ever. I would be probably quite happy to say, and we're going to try and do it purely student-led, which will be amazing. I'm doing a collaborative project with SSEHS around can we engage their academic research with AU clubs, so that people that are studying particular projects can link in, get participants from AU clubs, but also if AU clubs have got projects they think would be really useful, so for example if our dancers or our boxers wanted to work out what the nutritional effects are if they try and cut before a bout or before a competition, what the long-term effects are on mental health or on physical ability, actually they might be able to partner up with people in SSEHS who can run that, so that's quite an exciting project. We're trying to make our big matches and bigger events bigger than ever. We've got some cool ideas, especially for Durham Day and the Conference Cup, as I mentioned, so we're going to try and push that through. I'm really interested in introducing a new massive event called the Loughborough Sport Awards, which instead of having your IMS awards, your AU awards, you have them, but you also have one award ceremony that brings everybody together, that engages some of the national governing bodies that we've got on this campus, that brings in the big externals that we think we can tap into commercially, but also celebrates the top student volunteers in a really, really prestigious environment, and the university are on board with that as well. We're looking to run a mental health campaign within sport called Team Talk. We've got a really new system for welfare. We've got welfare reps trialling in 14 of our clubs. We've got a new welfare officer on the AU exec, and mental health is obviously something right at the forefront of the nation at the moment, but also within sport particularly. So we're going to look to drive that with a Team Talk campaign that Holly O'Shea's working on with a few others, and Hannah and myself. External communication profile. This was one of my manifesto points. I've only put it in the extras because I think we're well on the way to doing it. So we've brought back WOW, which you've seen, which I hope people enjoy. We're running newsletters every fortnight, and our social media is stronger than ever before, and we're linking in with media to do some stuff around match report, mainly driven by media that we're jumping on the back of, but hopefully we can work together to make that something pretty cool. Union links. We're doing more around union stuff than we've ever done before. So we've got AU Exec takes on Tough Guy. We're working alongside Actions, try and get involved in more projects. We're working with media alongside Matchport. We're doing stuff with welfare in terms of Team Talk. I'm basically a society chair for Wallball, so it's all going fine. And then finally, student development, right at the heart of what we do. So that's basically just making sure we've got the right training in place. We undertook a massive training restructure last year for a kind of year-long cycle of how we develop students in a better way for club committees. We're coming to the end of that. It's gone really well for us, but I think the next thing is how we develop kind of not so much our club volunteers, but our AU exec and other volunteers that get involved in sport in different ways. So that's my pitch.